The boy paid for their breakfast with his last. And he had no idea the old couple watching him would change everything. The breakfast rush at Sunnyside Diner in Columbus, Ohio hit hardest on Saturday mornings. By 9 a.m., every booth was taken. The smell of bacon grease and fresh coffee hung in the warm air like something permanent, like it had soaked into the walls years ago and never left. Plates clattered. Conversations overlapped. A baby in a corner booth laughed at something nobody else could see. Outside the wide front windows, autumn had arrived in full force. Gold and orange and red leaves pressing against the glass like they were trying to get a look inside. It was the kind of American morning that only exists in that short, perfect window between summer ending and winter arriving. Warm enough to walk without a jacket. Cold enough to want something hot in your hands. Marcus Bell was 14 years old, and he was counting his money under the counter so nobody would see. He had been doing it carefully by folding the bills flat, pressing them against his thigh, moving his lips slightly as he counted. $11 and some change. He knew the exact amount already. He had counted it twice this morning before leaving the apartment, but he counted it again anyway. The way you do when you're hoping the number has somehow changed since the last time you checked. It hadn't. He'd earned every cent of it across 5 days of work, Monday and Tuesday. He'd raked leaves for Mr. Patterson on Elm Street, a big corner lot with 3 oak trees that dropped, enough leaves to fill a small swimming pool. Wednesday, he'd carried groceries for Mrs. Huang 3 blocks over. 2 trips, heavy bags, no complaints. Thursday, he'd returned bottles to the corner store, which paid 3 cents each, and he'd collected enough to make it worth the walk. Friday, he'd helped his neighbor drag an old sofa down 3 flights of stairs for $2. $11 5 days, and every cent of it already spoken for before he'd even walked into the diner. His mother worked double shifts at the hospital, days and evenings 6 days a week. Coming home at 2 in the morning with her work, shoes still on and falling asleep on the couch before she could make it to the bedroom. She never complained. She never asked for anything. She just kept showing up, kept working, kept holding everything together with both hands in sheer determination. His little sister, Amara, 7 years old, gap-toothed. The loudest laugh in any room she entered, needed new shoes before the cold weather arrived. Her current ones had a small split along the left sole that let in water when it rained. Marcus had noticed it 2 weeks ago. He hadn't said anything to his mother because she already had enough to carry. He'd just started working. $11 wasn't going to solve everything, but it was what he had, and Marcus Bell was not the kind of boy who sat still waiting for the world to improve on its own. He ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, black coffee and 1 egg on toast. $3.50, slid onto a stool at the far end of the counter, pulled out his math homework and got to work. He was halfway through a page of algebra when the door opened. They came in slowly, an elderly man and woman, both in their 70s, moving with the careful, deliberate pace of people who had learned not to rush. The man was tall, slightly stooped, with silver white hair and kind eyes set in a deeply lined face. He wore a teal-colored sweater over a collared shirt, and he held the door open for the woman beside him, with the automatic courtesy of someone who had been doing it for 50 years. The woman wore a dark burgundy coat, silver hair cut neatly close to her head, thin framed glasses that sat slightly low on her nose. She had the kind of face that made you feel somehow that she had seen a great deal of life and had made her peace with most of it. They looked like someone's grandparents. The good kind. The kind with a house that smelled like cedar and cinnamon, a glass dish of hard candy on the coffee table, and a dining room table big enough for everyone. They stepped up to the register at the front counter, and the woman, moving with quiet efficiency, opened her small purse and began to look for her card. She looked once. Then again. She moved things around carefully. Her fingers slowed. Then she turned to her husband with an expression Marcus recognized immediately. Not embarrassment exactly, but that particular tightening around the eyes that happens when a person realizes, in a public place, that something has gone wrong. "Walter," she said softly, "I think I left the card at home." Walter, the man, patted his jacket pockets with both hands. Front pockets, side pockets, then the inside breast pocket. His face stayed calm, but his hands moved with a quiet urgency that told its own story. "My wallet's in the car," he said. "I'll go get it." "Sir, it's fine," said the cashier, a broad, pleasant man in a lavender shirt named Doug, though his tone carried the particular weight of someone managing a growing line and not entirely sure how this was going to resolve. 6 people were waiting behind the elderly couple. The Saturday morning crowd had no patience built in. Marcus had already put his pencil down. He didn't think about it the way people think about decisions. There was no internal debate, no calculation, no moment of weighing options. Something in him simply responded. The way a hand moves toward something falling before the brain has issued the instruction. He reached into his hoodie pocket. He pulled out the $10 bill, crisp, earned across 5 days of leaf raking and grocery carrying and bottle returning, and he held it out across the counter toward Doug. "I got it," he said. Doug looked at him with the expression of a man recalibrating. "Son, their order is $9.50. "I know," Marcus said. The elderly woman turned from the register. Her eyes found Marcus, this skinny 14-year-old kid in a gray hoodie, sitting at a diner counter with algebra homework and a $3.50 breakfast. And her expression shifted in a way that was hard to name. It wasn't pity. It wasn't surprise exactly. It was something older than both of those things. Something that looked, if you had to put a word to it, like recognition. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you absolutely do not have to do that." "I know," Marcus said, and he smiled. The easy, uncomplicated smile of a boy who had been raised right and knew it. "But I want to." He laid the 10 on the counter. Walter and his wife, Eleanor. Marcus would learn her name shortly. Didn't leave right away. They could have. Walter had offered to go get his wallet from the car. They could have paid Marcus back immediately, thanked him politely, and taken their breakfast to a booth. That would have been the clean, simple ending to a small moment of unexpected kindness. Instead, Eleanor touched her husband's arm, and they found 2 stools at the counter near Marcus. And while Doug poured their coffee, Eleanor turned to the boy beside her. "What's your name?" "Marcus." "How old are you, Marcus?" 14. She glanced at his homework, then at his breakfast, then back at him. "Is that money you earned yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." "How?" He told her, unself-consciously, matter-of-factly, the leaf raking, the groceries, the bottles, the sofa on the stairs. He didn't recite it like a list of virtues. He said it the way he said everything. Plainly. Like these were simply the facts of his life. And he had made his peace with them. A long time ago. Walter had been listening quietly. Now he leaned forward slightly. "Do you always drink your coffee black?" Marcus grinned. "I'm trying to get used to it." Walter laughed, warm and genuine from the belly. Eleanor smiled. The stiffness of the awkward moment dissolved completely, and what replaced it was something easy and real, the particular comfort of a conversation between people who were not performing anything for each other. They talked for nearly 40 minutes. Walter asked questions that surprised Marcus, not polite. Surface questions, but real ones. What was he good at in school? What did he think about when he wasn't doing homework? Did he have a teacher who saw something in him? What did he want his life to look like in 10 years? Marcus answered each one honestly. "Math," he said. "I'm good at math. And I like building things and figuring out how stuff works. Last year I fixed our kitchen faucet by watching YouTube videos." "Who's your favorite teacher?" "Mr. Okafor. He says I think in patterns." Walter set his coffee cup down. "Do you know what that means?" "Not really." "It means you have an engineering mind," Walter said. "The ability to see structure inside complexity. It's not something that can be taught. You either see it or you don't." Marcus looked at him. "How do you know that?" Walter was quiet for a moment. "Because I spent 40 years looking for people who had it," he said. "And I learned to recognize it early." Eleanor put her hand on Walter's arm, just lightly. Just briefly, and something passed between them. Walter looked at his coffee. Marcus didn't ask what Walter meant. He sensed it wasn't the right moment, so he just nodded and went back to his eggs. When they finished, Walter went to his car and returned with his wallet. He tried twice to give Marcus his $10 back. Marcus refused both times, politely, firmly. The second time he almost laughed. "Please, son," Walter said. At least let me—" "No, sir," Marcus said. "I gave it because I wanted to. Taking it back would ruin the whole thing." Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Eleanor. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, not quite something else. Something in between. "Can I ask you one more thing?" Eleanor said. "Sure. If someone gave you a real opportunity, not money, but a door, what would you do with it?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at his homework on the counter. He thought about his mother sleeping on the couch with her shoes on. He thought about Amara's shoe with the split sole that let the cold in. He thought about the apartment they'd moved into 8 months ago when the old landlord raised the rent, and how his mother had cried exactly once, quietly in the kitchen, when she thought he was asleep, and never mentioned it again. "I'd make sure it counted," he said quietly. "Not just for me." Eleanor nodded, slowly, like he had answered something she'd been asking for a very long time. They said goodbye. Marcus watched them walk out into the autumn morning, Walter holding the door, Eleanor stepping carefully onto the sidewalk, both of them moving back into a world that Marcus knew nothing about. He finished his homework, paid his $3.50, walked home through the falling leaves. He figured that was the end of it. He was wrong. 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, a plain white envelope arrived at their apartment. No return address. His name written in careful, old-fashioned handwriting on the front. Inside was a single card, 4 sentences. "Marcus, your character spoke louder than you know. There is a full academic scholarship available at Westfield Academy for a student who earns it through more than grades. We believe you've already demonstrated the most important qualification. Please call if you're interested. U.N.E. Harrison." Marcus read it 3 times standing in the hallway. Then he went to the family computer and typed the name into the search bar. Walter Harrison, founder and former CEO of Harrison Industrial Group, one of the largest infrastructure development companies in the United States. Net worth estimated at $4.2 billion, named among the 50 most influential Americans in business for 19 consecutive years. And, Marcus read this part slowly twice, founder of the Harrison Youth Foundation, which had quietly funded the full education of over 300 underprivileged students across the country in the past 16 years. No press releases, no ceremonies, just doors opened one at a time, for kids who had demonstrated something that couldn't be manufactured. Marcus sat back in his chair. He stared at the screen for a long time. He thought about that $10 bill, the last real money he'd had. He thought about the way Eleanor had looked at him across the diner counter, not with pity, but with that quiet, certain recognition, like she had been watching for something specific and had finally, after a long time looking, seen it. He thought about Walter's question. Do you know what it means to think in patterns? He thought about Mr. Okafor, who had written on his last report card, "Marcus has a mind built for more than this classroom. Someone needs to open the right door." He picked up the phone. His mother came and sat beside him on the couch. When she heard his voice change, that shift that happens when something real is occurring, she didn't know what the call was about. She just knew her son, this quiet, serious, hardworking boy who never asked for anything and gave what little he had without hesitation, was holding the phone with both hands and sitting very straight. The line connected. "Hello," said a warm, familiar voice. "Is this Marcus?" "Yes, sir," he said. His voice was steady. "This is Marcus Bell." His mother watched his face as the conversation began. She watched his eyes go still the way they did when he was absorbing something important. She watched his jaw set with that particular, quiet resolve she had known since he was 3 years old and had decided, on his own, that he was going to learn to tie his shoes without help. She didn't know yet that the call would lead to a full scholarship. She didn't know about Westfield Academy, or the Harrison Foundation, or the 400 other students, whose lives had been quietly redirected by 2 elderly people who spent their Saturday mornings in ordinary diners, watching for something that most people walked right past. She just knew, sitting beside her son in their small Columbus apartment with autumn pressing gold against the windows, that something had shifted, something important, the kind of shift you feel before you fully understand it. Outside, the leaves kept falling, gold and orange and red, the same colors that had filled the diner windows 4 days ago, when a boy with $11 had reached into his pocket without hesitation and changed the entire direction of his life. Not because of the $10, because of who he already was when he spent it. Some doors don't have signs on them. They just open for the people who were already worthy of walking through.